The world in the 1900s was lit by fire and shadowed by empires. Picture an age when the heart of Istanbul beats to the rhythm of the mysterious Ottoman Empire and the industrial machine that was London. This was a time of heroes and villains, of battles and bravery, and, if some stories are to be believed, an era of the most bizarre tactics in military history. Who needs guns and bombs when you can conquer with opium-laced cigarettes? Yes, you heard that right. Today we're not just talking about trenches and treaties. We're exploring the most entertainingly dubious story of World War I, the alleged British strategy of airdropping opium-laced cigarettes onto unsuspecting Ottoman soldiers. Was it an ingenious tactic, or just a puff of smoke? Stick around, and we'll sift through the ashes of the historical mystery together. But that's not all. Brace yourself for the thrilling tales of periscope rifles, a man known as Lawrence of Arabia, and the legend of a donkey savior at Gallipoli. And let's not forget our pit stop in Mesopotamia, where seaplanes and cavalry horses share the same stage. So prepare for laughter, learning, and a healthy dose of, did that really happen? As we venture into an extraordinary clash of British and Ottoman empires in this episode of Historical Quarrels. All right, y'all. Before we begin, I would like to take the time to remind everybody this show is very NSFW, and I will make jokes out of some very dark aspects of the quarrels talked about in this show. Not to undercut the seriousness of the situation, but because it makes me giggle. And I have done it so much throughout my life and laughed about so much dark shit that I'm sure I've tricked my brain into a dopamine loop where it only finds humor in cruel and terrible things. That or I'm just a terrible person. Either way, you've been warned. Moving on to some quick announcements though. The Passion Podcast recently did an interview with me. Please go check out that show. You can find it wherever you get your podcasts. My friend Ashley does a cool show where she interviews people about their passions, and it's great. Please go check it out. Stereotypical, the new show my friends and I are making, will have episode 1 released this Thursday. Please go check that out when it drops. And third, I want to hear from you. I want the show to be the best it can be, and the best way to do that is to get feedback from the people who listen to what you put out. I don't know each of you personally, so I have an email, historicalquarrels@gmail.com, where you can talk with me. I have also made socials for Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Threads, and Twitter that you can find in the show notes. Have a chat with me. I'd love to get to know you better. All right, that's it for announcements. So for today's episode, we will first go over a summary of events that led the United Kingdom and the Ottoman Empire to join the First World War. Then we will be going over the engagements and campaigns between the UK and the Ottomans, and their more interesting stories as well, such as the laced opium cigs and the real-life Lawrence of Arabia, and many more. Now, as many of these battles and engagements were happening simultaneously, there will be some jumping back and forth in the timeline. So I will do my best to clarify where and when we are. Then I will go over the aftermaths from these engagements and talk about how it affected both the UK and the Ottoman Empire. And then we will go to the end of the show where I usually just ad-lib some heartfelt stuff, give you my thoughts on the topic, and like usual, solicit my Feet Finder account. If you are here for the new link to the feet pics, I hit the link in the show notes, or you can skip to the end of the episode where I give out the special code needed to access the new drops without paying extra on the site. Quick reminder, please do not share these pictures with anyone, as that has become my main source of income since I lost my job. And I worked really hard to get a few of those shots. All right, anyways, let's begin this quarrel. The United Kingdom entered World War I due to a series of diplomatic and military developments in the summer of 1914. So here's a quick rundown. First, and most commonly known, the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand, which was on June 28th of 1914. The heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne was assassinated by a Serbian nationalist. This incident sent off a cascade of diplomatic exchanges and threats throughout Europe. Basically pissed everyone in Europe off. And they were like, well, fuck it, time to go to war. And then we have the July crisis. Austria-Hungary, suspecting that Serbia had a role in the assassination and seeing an opportunity to suppress Serbian nationalism, which was a threat to the integrity of their multinational empire, issued an ultimatum to Serbia. Serbia's response wasn't satisfactory to Austria-Hungary, which then declared war on Serbia. And then we had the Russian mobilization on July 30th of 1914. And so Russia, due to its pan-Slavic sympathies and alliance with Serbia, began mobilization of its army against Austria-Hungary. And then we had the German support and declaration of war on August 1st of 1914. So officially, war gets declared because Germany allied with Austria-Hungary through the dual alliance, viewed the Russian mobilization as an act of war and declared war on Russia. And then Germany, as part of the Schlieffen Plan, its strategic plan for winning a two-front war, declared war on Belgium in order to march through it to outflank the French army as well. And so once France got involved, Britain had agreed to maintain Belgium's neutrality in the Treaty of London. When Germany violated this neutrality, Britain demanded that Germany withdraw, being like, hey, if you don't withdraw, we have to hold our oath. And then when Germany refused, Britain declared war on Germany. So kind of very simplified version of a breakdown of events of why Britain got involved in the war. Essentially, Germany decided to declare war on a bunch of people, mainly their way of justifying troop maneuvers through the country. They had to declare war on allies of Britain. And Britain was like, well, fuck you. Don't do that. So it was very multifaceted. There was a legal and moral obligation to uphold the neutrality of Belgium mainly. However, there are also strategic and geopolitical factors. Britain was concerned about maintaining the balance of power in Europe and the increasing threat posed by a dominant and militarized Germany, especially to its naval supremacy and its colonies overseas. Britain had a loose network of agreements known as the Entente Cordiale with France and Russia, and it had strategic reasons to support these countries against the Central Powers as well. Okay, so that's it for Britain. Let's move on to Ottoman. And the Ottoman Empire's entry into World War I was guided by several strategies and political considerations as well. Mainly, however, there was the decline of the Ottoman Empire, which began with Ibrahim the Mad, kind of like how I spoken on that in a different episode. The empire had been losing territory and power over the last few decades, so it sought alliances that could help it recover those lost territories and improve its international standing. Like Germany, they decided to team up with Germany and be cool with them. And then we had the Balkan Wars, which were 1912 to 13. The Ottoman Empire lost almost all of its territories in Europe in the two Balkan Wars. This pushed the empire further to seek alliances with powerful countries. And then we had the German-Ottoman official alliance August 2nd of 1914. The Ottoman Empire, having been snubbed by the other major European powers, signed a secret alliance with Germany because they gotta keep it a little sneaky. Can't let people know that they're teaming up. Germany was seen as a rising power that could help the empire regain its lost territories and prestige. This alliance was not an immediate declaration of war, but more or less provided the foundation for them going into the war whenever they wanted to. And Germany would kind of push them to get into the war, like, hey, we need more people. And then we had naval engagements in October 29th of 1914, which is almost the official declaration. They pretty much were in the war at this point. So 2 ships of the German Mediterranean fleet, the Goeben and Breslau, pursued by British naval forces, sought refuge in the Ottoman capital of Constantinople in early August 1914. The ships were then transferred to the Ottoman Navy, but remained under German control. They were used to launch a surprise attack on Russian ports in the Black Sea, essentially forcing the Ottomans into the war on the side of the Central Powers. So Germany was like, okay, we're going to put on the Ottoman flags on your ship and fuck you over hard. Okay. All right, buddy. Cool. And then we had the formal declarations of war, where Russia formally declared war on the Ottoman Empire on November 1st of 1914, 3 days later after the attack in October. Later that month, the other members of the Allies, Britain and France, also declared war on the Ottoman Empire. So the Ottoman Empire essentially had hoped that aligning itself with the Central Powers would provide an opportunity to regain lost territories and restore its prestige. It was also influenced by Germany's promise of financial and military assistance. The Ottoman Empire's participation in World War I would have a profound impact on its future, leading ultimately to its dismemberment and the creation of the modern Turkish state after the war. So let's get into this. The Ottoman Empire and the United Kingdom engaged in numerous battles during World War I. So we're going to go over a few of these today. I promise you, I'm really going to try fucking hard to get into everything and keep you guys, like where we're at. So after that whole shit with Germany forcing them to switch flags and forcing the Ottoman Empire into the war, there was an attack led by France. And the French troops landed at Lemnos in 1915. And after the failure of some naval attacks by the Allies, troops were assembled to eliminate the Ottoman mobile artillery, which Germany was using, which was preventing the Entente minesweepers from clearing the way for larger vessels. The Australian and New Zealand troops were formed into the Australian New Zealand Army Corps, or ANZAC. And this group's going to be very important throughout the war for the Allies side. The ANZAC was commanded by Lieutenant General Sir William Birdwood, comprising the volunteer 1st Australian Division and the New Zealand and Australian Division. The ANZAC troops were joined by the regular 29th Division and the Royal Naval Division. So they did a lot of naval and Royal Air Force engagements, essentially. All these men were placed under the command of General Sir Ian Hamilton, who had the world's greatest mustache and looked like a frailer, less ripped Major Alex Armstrong from the Full Metal Alchemist series. If you don't know what Full Metal Alchemist is, highly recommend you go check it up. Watch Brotherhood. Anyways, despite being frail, he was described as a man full of youth and vigor. And I am positive his wife, Jean Hamilton, loved his mustache rides. Absolutely loved them. Over the following month, Hamilton prepared his plan, and the British and French divisions joined the Australians in Egypt. Hamilton chose to concentrate on the southern part of Gallipoli Peninsula at Cape Helles and Sedubrakler. I definitely did not pronounce that right. I tried to learn how to pronounce it. No, I can't. I don't have that Uyghur whatever thing is that you have to pronounce some of those words. It's whatever. Anyways, where an unopposed landing was expected, the Entente initially discounted the fighting ability of the Ottoman soldiers, and the naivete of the Entente planners was illustrated by a leaflet that was issued to the British and Australians while they were still in Egypt. The leaflet basically said, "You guys are fucking dumb. Love, Ottomans." Though Turkish soldiers, as a rule, manifest the desire to surrender by holding their rifle butt upward and by waving clothes or rags of any color, an actual white flag should be regarded with the utmost suspicion, as Turkish soldier is unlikely to possess anything of that color. And they totally, thought that they're waving white flags, and yeah, it doesn't matter. Anyways, Australian troops went to Greece initially in the Mediterranean. This is our pit stop in Mediterranean, by the way. The underestimation of the Ottoman military potential stemmed from a sense of superiority among the Entente. They basically thought they were backwards people from the East. And because of the decline of the Ottoman Empire and its poor performance in Libya during the Italo-Turkish War of 1911 through 1912, and the Balkan Wars again of 1912 and 13, Entente intelligence failed to adequately prepare for the campaign, in some cases relying on information gained from Egyptian travel guides, essentially. They were like tourists thinking, oh, okay, you know, the Turkey army sucks. Like, look, this is what this travel guy says about like them, which is really fucking sad. Those were the worst spies. So lazy. The troops for the assault were loaded on transports in the order they were to disembark, causing a long delay, which meant that many troops, including the French at Mudros, were forced to detour to Alexandria to embark on the ships that would take them into battle. A 5-week delay, essentially, until the end of April ensued, during which the Ottomans were able to strengthen their defenses at the peninsula. Although bad weather and during March and April might have delayed the landings anyway, preventing supply and reinforcement, following preparations in Egypt, Hamilton and his headquarters staff arrived at Mudros on the 10th of April. And then the Anzac Corps departed Egypt in early April and assembled on the island of Lemnos in Greece on the 12th of April, where a small garrison had been established in early March and practice landings were undertaken. So, the British 29th Division departed for Mudros on the 7th of April, and the Royal Naval Division rehearsed on the island of Skyros after arriving there on the 17th of April. That day, the British submarine HMS E-15 tried to run the straits, but hit a submarine net, which this is kind of interesting, by the way. They were an invention made during World War I that would become a deterrent for submarine warfare. However, after the war, it was realized that they weren't all that effective, really, because they were essentially fish nets for giant metal fish, which submarines are. And people actually just went against them and would just run through them, essentially. But the reason why they worked, at least at the beginning of the war, was because neither side knew how effective it was really going to be against submarines. So they would kind of, you know, be avoidant or like go away from it, you know, just try and find different routes, essentially, because they were like, not sure if this is gonna fuck us up or not. So let's maybe just not risk it because these submarines are very expensive. So really, the nets were an underwater game of chicken, and the winners of the game were typically the ones who didn't give a shit and gave off that big dick energy, just to run right through or above the nets. However, the HMS E-15 did not have the same big dick energy that the German SMUB-116 did, who would continually run through fucking underwater nets because they didn't give a shit. And Germans had a much better navy. And so it ran aground and was shelled by a Turkish fort, killing its commander, Lieutenant Commander Theodore S. Brody, and 6 of his crew. The survivors were forced to surrender. I'm just surprised, not everyone died, to be honest. So just kind of interesting little tidbit about World War I and some warfare that was used. The Entente fleet and British-French troops were assembled at Mudros, ready for the landings, but poor weather from the 19th of March grounded the Entente aircraft for 9 days. And on the 24 days, only a partial program of reconnaissance flights were possible. So let's go over to the Ottoman side and look at their preps, how they prepared. The Ottoman force prepared to repel a landing on either side of the straits, and they used their 5th Army. This force, which initially consisted of 5 divisions, with another en route, was a conscript force. Essentially, slaves forced to fight. They were commanded by Otto Lehmann von Sanders. Otto Lehmann von Sanders and many of the senior officers in the 5th Army were also German. They were also super German. They loved beer und schnitzels. Anyways, I'll stop maybe doing that, but I love doing a fake German accent. Ottoman commanders and senior German officers debated the best means of defending the peninsula. All agreed that the best defense was to hold the high ground on the ridges of the peninsula. There was disagreement as to where the enemy would land and hence where to concentrate forces. Lieutenant Colonel Mustafa Kemal was familiar with the Gallipoli Peninsula from his operations against Bulgaria in the Balkan Wars, and he forecasted that the Kape Hills, like I had mentioned earlier from the British side, they were totally planning that, the southern tip of the peninsula, and Gaba Tepe were likely areas for landing. Mustafa Kemal believed that the British would use their naval power to command the land from every side at the tip of the peninsula. He was positive that the Brits were fans of gangbangs and loved to just cover an area with their seamen and navy from his time spent in England and the horrors he bore witness to there. You know, like them complaining about the weather, eating fish and chips, binge drinking tea and alcohol, and being totally fine with Armenians, which to Mustafa was fucking ridiculous. Who could love an Armenian? Nonetheless, this experience would prove invaluable to him in this battle. The 19th Division, Kemal, and the 9th Division were placed along the Aegean coast and at Capehels on the tip of the peninsula as well. So German Sanders, which you might have been like the Kentucky Fried Chicken version. I don't know. I like to imagine this like German Sanders as like he likes Kentucky Fried Chicken, but he keeps calling them schnitzel for some reason. So we're going to pretend that. Anyways, he kept the bulk of the Ottoman forces inland in reserve, leaving a minimum of troops guarding the coast. A maximum effort to improve land and sea communications was ordered due to the 5-week advance that that the British gave them, essentially. To move reinforcements swiftly to danger points, troops moved at night to avoid Entente air reconnaissance, which there wasn't a whole lot of because, again, they were grounded for most of the time. Sanders' strategy was opposed by Ottoman commanders, including Kemal, who believed that the defenders were too widely dispersed to defeat the invasion on the beaches. Basically, he was saying that Sanders was stretching the resources way too thin, was essentially goat-seeing himself so the enemy could see right where the pink, fleshy weak spot was, which he was kind of right. But Sanders was certain that a rigid system of defense would fail, and that the only hope of success lay in the mobility of the three groups, particularly in the 19th Division near Bogali, in general reserve, ready to move to Belair, Gaba Tepe, or the Asiatic shore, to get there, essentially, so that way they could get to one of those three areas. And so he went ahead with the full goatsea, thinking his legs would be able to pincer in fast enough before the UK's big hard seamen could penetrate them, essentially. Okay. Now we're at the landing of Gallipoli in April of 1915. All right. The United Kingdom's 29th Division was to land at Helles on the tip of the peninsula, and then advance upon the forts at Kilit Bahir. The Anzacs, with the 3rd Australian Infantry Brigade spearheading the assault, were to land north of Gaba Tepe on the Aegean coast, from where they could advance across the peninsula, cut off the Ottoman troops in Kilit Bahir, and stop reinforcements from reaching Capehels. You know, good idea overall, but they had shitty fucking intelligence. They had like tourist maps. They didn't have like a good map of the area. So I don't know what they're thinking. I'm positive some of the troops probably came up and were like, so we don't have like a good map of this region. You handed me a tourist guide, you asshole. Which I'm sure was just great for them. I bet these troops loved that, knowing they were going to fucking die. This sector of the Gallipoli Peninsula became known as Anzac. The area held by the British and French became known as the Helles sector, or Helles, which, interesting side note, is it now a common name for a German beer. The word Helles, meaning hell, obviously, but in German it can also mean light, bright, or pale. And you might be asking yourself, why is this important? I don't know. But it's a neat fact that I didn't know before this episode and thought it was like cool. And, maybe I thought the beer was going to be named after the area that the French occupied and tie it back into the story when I was initially diving deep into this, and then found nothing to corroborate this idea at all. And so I added that tidbit in just to waste your fucking time learning something, because, I didn't have to fucking learn, but did by my own mistake because I'm fucking dumb. Arrangements for naval gunfire support to the landings had originally included bombarding the beaches and approaches, but was changed to engagement of the ridges during the landings, with the beaches only to be shelled prior to the landings. No decision was ultimately made on made on the issue of close support, and it was left to the initiative of ship's captains. Because you got to have a scapegoat in these situations. That's what the top brass needed for this. A reluctance to approach the shore later affected landings at V and W Beach, where some of the worst losses among the infantry occurred. While naval gunfire was of some assistance, but it really didn't do jack shit for the UK here. It was kind of like when a toddler helps you clean up. You do everything really, but the toddler did pick up one or two things off the ground. And, the naval gunfire was the toddler in this scenario, and the adult picking up things were the adults being viciously slaughtered on the beach. And I'm talking getting fucking mowed down. It was brutal. It was so bad that Kitchener had ruled that air requirements must be met by the Royal Naval Air Service, or the RNAS. And the Entente employed a small force of seaplanes, which I'm sure Kitchener was thrilled to hear about. It was like, hey, we're getting slaughtered out here, and I'm pretty sure most of us will die if we don't get some air support. And their response was, here's like 3 seaplanes and a bucket of bullets, maybe some horses. Good luck. Which is so fucked to think about. The aircraft were unopposed by the small Ottoman Air Force at first and during the planning. The force had been used to provide aerial reconnaissance, although this ultimately proved inadequate to meet the Entente intelligence needs and make up for the lack of adequate maps, of which they had fucking none besides the tourist guides. Worst part is, the British decided to wait an extra 4 weeks to prepare for this shit, and basically didn't do anything other than get more men to be slaughtered there, which is really fucking cool of them to do, that's great. It's kind of like how I'll ask for some extra time to turn in an assignment, and like in college, and it's really not because I'm going to make it better or I'm working harder on it or anything like that. It's because I haven't done jack shit at all and didn't feel like doing it that week. That was the British intelligence support here. They were me in college trying to get shit, extended for no reason. After the landings, Entente aircraft conducted photographic reconnaissance, observed naval gunfire, reported on Ottoman troop movements, and conducted a small number of bombing raids. They're a little more useful than the naval bombardment. The UK would end up having a little more lunk on the Anzac Cove, however. So over on the Anzac Cove, the 1st Australian Division would land on the cove first, with the 3rd Infantry Brigade leading. God, I don't know what, you get something caught in your gut, and it's like an air bubble, and you want to get it out, but then it refuses to get out. That's what just happened to me there. Anyways, the 3rd Infantry Brigade was leading as a cover force, moving inland to establish positions on the gun ridge. They're, doing some solid sneaking around shit. The forces were to assemble at night and land at dawn to surprise the defenders. And on the evening of the 24th of April, the covering force embarked on battleships and destroyers, with the follow-on forces in on transports. The troops would disembark from the transports into ships or boats and be towed close to the shore by steamboats and then row ashore. Which, holy fuck, that must have been the scariest rowboat ride of all time. I love rowboat rides. I love going out into like a little pond, rowing a boat. It's nice and relaxing. This was not that. Horror movies, ghosts, demons, and Freddy Krueger be damned. I would have shit, pissed, and done other unspeakable things to my trousers during that ride over there. You get caught and you are blown the fuck up by some bomb. You're cut in half. Your guts are spewed everywhere. Ugh. At around 2 a.m., an Ottoman observer on a hill at Ariburnu saw a multitude of ships far on the horizon. He saw him sneaking in, and he was like, some guys trying to sneak in here. Gotta stop that shit. So Captain Fake, I think that's, I looked up how to pronounce the name. I'm pretty Faik or Q in place of the K. So Fake, in charge of a company from the 27th Infantry Regiment, verified it with his binoculars and immediately informed his commanding officer, Ismet Bey, at Kapatepe, and by 3 a.m., the moon was covered and the ships were no longer visible to the Ottomans, which must have been spooky as fuck. They were like Batman, but with a fleet of ships, and that's fucking cool. The Ottomans were not sure if this was a real landing or a diversion, Once the intense artillery was heard at around 6 a.m., the 2 remaining battalions of the 27th Infantry Regiment were ordered to make their way to Eriburnu as fast as their little Australian and New Zealand asses could. I am positive they called their COs cunts right before they left because they knew they were getting fucked over. German General Sanders had left his HQ and was at Boulaire. Distracted by the few Entente ships that had appeared, he had been confident that this was where the landings would take place. So for 2 fucking days, he remained at Boulaire with the 5th Division, waiting for the real landing. Which is like a totally reasonable thing to do in war, because they were totally ready to attack when they had already waited 4 weeks to prepare. If they're making you wait, they obviously need more time to attack. And that's, I'm playing 3D chess with them. I'm thinking mind games. Very rational. Much like it was rational for me to wait at the door when Vater said he was going out to grab schnitzels und milk. Why didn't you come home, Vater? Why? Sanders, much like his father's absence, created problems in the chain of command and delays in decision-making, which negated his defense scheme that relied on rapid movement of troops. They needed to hustle their asses over there, but because he decided to sit down on his ass and wait for Poppy to come home, they were fucked. And so at 4 a.m. on the morning of the 25th of April, the first wave of troops from the 3rd Brigade began moving towards the shore on lighters and boats. The covering force landed approximately about 1 mile or 2 kilometers too far north. So they're just a little too far ahead. In a bay just south of Eriburnu due to undetected currents or a navigational error. I'm pretty sure Jim just fucked up and was like, I think it's over here. And, just got a little too far. So they had to, I'm positive they beat the shit out of him after they realized they had to hike an extra 2 kilometers. Fucking asshole. The landing was a little more difficult. Over ground, which rose steeply from the beaches, and I'm talking fucking steep, it's hard to scale that shit. Unlike the objective to the south, which was more open, the landing site was garrisoned by only 2 Ottoman companies, but from positions on commanding ground. They had the high ground, Anakin, and the Ottomans inflicted numerous casualties on the Australians before being overcome. Many of the British got their arms and legs chopped off and went on to kill a bunch of younglings, or, they killed a bunch of younglings before that. The broken terrain prevented a coordinated drive inland, with the Australians on unfamiliar ground. Because, they're used to the outback or, I need to learn more Australian lingo. If any of you are in Australia, please, send me an email. Teach me some lingo I can use or like other stuff. I wanted to Google it, but it felt, it didn't feel right. So in a maze of steep ravines, spurs, and dense scrub, Australian parties that got forward quickly lost contact and were broken up into small groups. Some Australian troops reached the second ridge, but fewer still reached their objectives. And having become dispersed, the covering force could provide little support to follow up the force. So they're getting fucked here. However, the 1st and 2nd Brigades, then the New Zealand and Australian divisions, or Anzac again, landed on the beaches around Eriburnu and became entangled, which took time to sort out. They're kind of, entangled in the same way that I get entangled trying to put on pants sometimes. They cross, and it's weird. And I don't know how people do it normally every day. I got to put my pants on backwards and then shimmy it. No, nothing like that. They got entangled on the land, and it was just kind of hard to coordinate and get all their shit out. So for about 4 hours after the landings began, the bulk of the 1st Australian Division was ashore safely. Probably just chilling, drinking beer, doing whatever. And its leading elements were pushing inland. By mid-morning, Kemal had reorganized their defenses for a counterattack on the commanding heights of Tunuk Bair and Sari Bair. The right flank of the small lodgment taken by the Australians was driven in at 10:30 a.m., with most of the 400 plateau being lost. During the afternoon and evening, the left flank was pushed back from Baby 700 and the Neck. By evening, Bridges and Godley, the commanders for that piece of the brigades, recommended re-embarkation. Birdwood agreed, another commander, but after receiving advice from the Navy that re-embarkation was impossible, Hamilton ordered the troops to dig in instead. Just dig in there and get it. And the Ottoman counterattack was eventually repulsed, and the Australians established a perimeter roughly from Walker's Ridge in the north to Shell Green in the south. But again, this was fucking brutal. The casualties on the first day for Anzac was around 2,000 men killed or wounded. Just quite a few people to just have die instantly. And it's a number that I cannot imagine seeing that many corpses just, on the ground around me. Fucking crazy. The failure to secure the high ground led to a tactical stalemate, with the landings contained by the defenders in a perimeter less than 2 kilometers long. Okay. They would have a little more success at Cape Helles, or a little worse, I guess, in some ways, at Cape Helles. The Helles landing was made by the 29th Division. The division landed on 5 beaches in an arc about the tip of the peninsula named SVWXNY beaches from east to west. So they were getting ready to gangbang the shit out of these beaches. And on the 1st of May, the 29th Indian Brigade, including some Gurkha rifles, or just the name for the Indian troops there, landed, took and secured Sari Barir above the landing beaches and was joined by, again, more of the Gurkha rifles and the Zion Mule Corps. At Y Beach, during the first engagement, the first battle of Krithia, the Entente landed unopposed and advanced inland, which, again, because they're spread a little thin for the Ottomans, they were able to march there. There were only a small number of defenders in the village, but lacking orders to exploit the position at White Beach, the White Beach commander withdrew his forces to the beach. It was as close as the Entente ever came to capturing the village as the Ottomans brought up a battalion of the 25th Regiment, checking for any further movement. They were like, nah, no one else is getting in here. Gotta check my asshole. I ain't getting fucked today. So the main landings were made at V Beach, however, beneath the old Sedubulair fortress at W Beach, a short distance to the west, and on the other side of the Helles headland. Again, Helles, like the beer. Just think like that. Just think it's the beer. I don't know why I learned that. I'm still kind of upset myself that I went on that little tangent. I wasted an hour learning about Helles beer, thinking that maybe it was from this battle. But no, it wasn't. The covering force of Royal Munster Fusiliers and Hampshires landed from a converted collier SS River Clyde, which was run aground beneath the fortress so that the troops could disembark along the ramps, making it a little bit safer. They ran it aground on purpose. The Royal Dublin Fusiliers landed at V Beach and at the Lancashire Fusiliers at W Beach in open boats on a shore overlooked by dunes and obstructed with barbed wire. On both beaches, the Ottoman defenders occupied good defensive positions and inflicted many casualties. Because again, they were in open boats, and I gotta imagine it was just, picking season for them. There's one little British guy. Ooh, look, a Frenchie. Dead. It's super easy for them. So, troops emerging one by one from sally ports on River Clyde were shot by machine gunners at Sedlerfort, and of the first 200 soldiers to disembark, 21 men reached the beach, which, holy fuck, could you imagine just 179 of your buddies just getting mowed down, and there's only 21 of you left? I don't know. War back then was war's still scary. I cannot imagine being in war, but back then must have been even more frightening. The balls these guys must have been huge. Giant stone-ass balls. The Ottoman defenders were too few to defeat the landing, but inflicted many casualties and contained the attack close to the shore. By the morning of the 25th of April, out of ammunition and with nothing but bayonets to meet the attackers on the slopes leading up from the beach to the heights of Chunuk Bair, the 57th Infantry Regiment received orders from Kemal. I do not order you to fight. I order you to die. Which, holy fuck, that's like hardcore. He continues on saying, in the time which passes until we die, other troops and commanders can come forward and take our places. Literally telling them, you fight to the death and other people will be able to take your place. Saying that their deaths were meaningless. Kemal was a bastard. Oh, that's fucking crazy. Sorry, rereading this again, I was like, oh, that's why I kept that in here. That was hardcore shit that he said. Every man of the regiment was either killed or wounded, which is nuts. Anyways, at W Beach, thereafter known as Lancashire Landing, Lancashires were able to overwhelm the defenders despite the loss of 600 casualties from 1,000 men. Holy fuck, so many people die. 6 awards of the Victoria Cross were made along the Lancashires at W Beach, meaning just, over and above bravery, doing some crazy shit essentially. And then a further 6 Victoria Crosses were awarded among the infantry and sailors at the V Beach Landing, and 3 more were awarded the following day as they fought their way inland. 5 squads of Ottoman infantry led by Sergeant Yahya distinguished themselves by repulsing several attacks on their hilltop position. The defenders eventually disengaging under the cover of darkness. Again, like fucking Batman. All these WW1 guys were like Batman, essentially. Just a bunch of Bruce Waynes out there fucking people up, or Alfreds. Crazy. After the landing, so few men remained from the Dublin and Munster Fusiliers that they were amalgamated into the Dubsters, which is a cute way that to combine the names together. We'll just call ourselves the Dubsters. I miss my friends. Only 1 Dubliner officer survived the landing, while of the 1,012 Dubliners who landed, just 11 survived the Gallipoli campaign unscathed. Oh, lots of people coming home with just 1 arm, or a little fucked up in the face. There's so many tales of that. So fucking nuts. I never want to go to war, guys, but if we have to, you have to. It's fine. After the landings, little was done by the Entente to exploit the situation, apart from a few limited advances inland by small groups of men. The ones who probably, had the Victoria Cross and had the biggest balls out of everyone. The Entente attack lost momentum, and the Ottomans had time to bring up reinforcements and rally the small number of defending troops. So now we get into the land campaign. So after everybody got on and they had gotten their positions, now we're getting into the battles in Gallipoli, where they're fighting just on land. Everyone's pretty much there. Anzac, the landing that took place was on the afternoon of the 27th of April. The 19th Division, reinforced by 6 battalions from the 5th Division, counterattacked the 6th Entente brigades at Anzac. With the support of naval gunfire, the Entente held back the Ottomans throughout the night. The following day, the British were joined by French troops transferred from Cumkale, and I shit you not, it's called Cumkale, which just makes me think of a really nasty salad with some nasty ranch dressing on it, it's probably not ranch dressing. Anyways, on the Asiatic shore, to the right of the line near S Beach at Mortal Bay, is where they joined up with the Frenchies. On the 28th of April, the Entente fought the first battle of Kharthia to capture the village. Hunter Weston made a plan which proved overly complex and was poorly communicated to the commanders in the field. And which I get it. I get making a little too complicated of a plan. You're thinking, this is going to be a good idea. You think that you're a fucking genius, when in all reality, it's always the simplest solution. Reminds me when I was a kid, I used to make these super complicated theories of this is this, or this person's thinking this way because they're thinking this, or maybe they had this situation, when in all reality they're just being an asshole, or they just wanted something, and that was it. There was no deep diving at all, no iceberg that I had to go through. It's just a very simple thing, which just remember, whenever you're doing something, try to keep it as simple as possible, and it will probably work better than any complicated shit that you come up with. So the troops of the 29th Division were still exhausted and unnerved by the battles of the beaches and for Sedubalir village, because almost all of their buddies have died. However, they captured the village, and after much fighting on the 26th of April, the Ottoman defenders stopped the Entente advance halfway between the Hells Headland and Kharthia around 6 p.m. Having inflicted 3,000 fucking casualties. People were just fucking dying. constantly in this war. The Ottomans were fucking the British up. And the British, you gotta remember, the British thought the Ottomans were these like weak Easterners who weren't worth their fucking time at all. They thought this was going to be the easiest battle of their lives. And they're getting their shit rocked right now. As Ottoman reinforcements arrived, the possibility of a swift Entente victory on the peninsula disappeared completely. They were shit out of luck, and the fighting at Hels and Anzac became a battle of attrition. So, on the 30th of April, the Royal Naval Division landed. The same day, Kemmel believed that the Entente were on the verge of defeat. They began moving troops forward through the Wire Gully near the 400th plateau on the Lone Pine. 8 battalions of reinforcements were dispatched from Istanbul a day later and that afternoon. Ottoman troops counterattacked at Hels and Anzac. The Ottomans briefly broke through in the French sector, but the attacks were repulsed by massed Entente machine gun fire. They just came in there just like fucking Rambo, just like, die Ottomans, die! Which inflicted many casualties on the attackers. Finally, they're starting to like, kick some ass back. Not just get their shit rocked in. The following night, Birdwood ordered the New Zealand and Australian divisions to attack from Russell's Top and Quinn's Post towards Baby 700. The Australian 4th Infantry Brigade, led by Colonel John Monash, the New Zealand and Australian infantry brigades, and the Royal Marines. Royal Marines. I can say English words, I promise. From the Chatham Battalion took part in the attack. Covered by a naval and artillery barrage, the troops advanced a short distance during the night, but got separated in the dark. The attackers came under mass small arms fire from their exposed left flank and were repulsed, having suffered about 1,000 casualties, which I'm sure was just, a little mistake that one of their buddies made because he had to go out and pee while he was covering the flank. And, when you got to pee, you got to pee. And it's worth 1,000 of your buddies dying to empty that bladder. I'm sorry, that's terrible. An important story that becomes a legend goes on here about a private named John Simpson Kirkpatrick and his donkeys, whose story I'm going to share with you now. John Kirkpatrick, commonly known as John Simpson, was a stretcher bearer with the 3rd Australian Field Ambulance during the Gallipoli campaign. Simpson was born on the 6th of July, 1892 in Eldon Street, Tyne South Shields, County Durham, England to Scottish parents, Sarah Kirkpatrick and Robert Kirkpatrick. He was one of 8 children and worked with donkeys as a youth during summer holidays. He just loved asses, man. He was an ass man, and which is respectable. We should all try to be like him and be more into asses like he was. He attended Barnes Road Junior School and later Mortimer Road Senior School. At 16, he volunteered to train as a gunner in the Territorial Force, as British Army Reserve units were known at the time. And in the early 1909, he joined the British Merchant Navy. So in May of 1910, Simpson deserted his ship at Newcastle, New South Wales, and traveled widely in Australia, taking on various jobs, such as cane cutting in Queensland and coal mining in the Illawarra district of New South Wales. In the 3 or so years leading up to the outbreak of the First World War, he worked as a steward, stoker, and greaser on Australian coastal ships. He loved being around seamen, and who doesn't? He also loved being around asses. Asses and seamen was John Simpson's tale. Simpson held, or developed, left-wing political views while he worked in Australia, and wrote in a letter to his mother, I often wonder I'm going to give this more of an old-timey voice. I often wonder when the working men of England will wake up and see things as other people see them. What they want in England is a good revolution, and that will clear some of these millionaires and lords and dukes out of it. And then, with a Labour government, they will almost be able to make their own conditions. Which is, pretty communistic in some ways, but also same shit, different era for a lot of people, where it's just millionaires that are kind of like putting shit on the lower class, which they really were doing in England back then. They were definitely fucking over a bunch of people. And according to former union leader Alf Rankin, there's anecdotal evidence that Simpson belonged to the industrial workers of the world, or IWW, or Wobblies, a radical international labor union. They're radicals, considered radicals because they wanted, better treatment. Which is really fucked up. This, however, has never really been confirmed by historical documents or other sources, just like the one guy. So Simpson enlisted in the Australian Imperial Force after the outbreak of the war, apparently as a means of returning to England. He enlisted as John Simpson and may have dropped his real surname to avoid being identified as a ship deserter, which is why he was sent to Australia. Simpson, again, they sent a bunch of criminals to Australia, just people that they, didn't like. Simpson enlisted as a field ambulance stretcher bearer, a role given to physically strong men. And on the 23rd of August of 1914 at Swan Barracks, Francis Street in Perth, and undertook training at Black Boy Hill Training Camp. Black Boy Hill Training Camp. That's I forgot reading about that. Weird name. Anyway, he was assigned to the 3rd Australian Field Ambulance and the regimental number 202. Simpson landed on the Gallipoli Peninsula on the 25th of April with a bunch of other people and survived at first, with the 3rd Field Ambulance as part of the 1st Australian Division. In the early hours of the following day, he was bearing a wounded comrade on his shoulders, and he spotted a donkey. He spotted that ass and quickly began making use of it to carry his fellow soldiers. He wanted all of his soldiers to ride on asses because he knew how great asses were. Simpson would sing and whistle, seeming to ignore the bullets flying through the air while tended to his comrades, which I don't know if I was being rescued by this man, if I would be more scared of the bullets flying at us or him, who just seems to be jauntily walking through a field of death with no care in the world, which is crazy. He used at least 5 different donkeys, known as Duffy number 1, Duffy number 2. I think after Duffy number 2 died, he was like, I should probably not name them Duffy anymore. And with Murphy, and then Queen Elizabeth, and then Abdul at Gallipoli. It's just so funny that it went Duffy 1, then Duffy 2. He's like, Duffy 1 didn't work out. Maybe Duffy 2 will have a little more luck. I bet it was the next day that Duffy 2 died. And that's why when he found the 3rd one, he was like, all right, different name. Let's go with Murphy. All right, so obviously the donkeys were killed or wounded in action. He and the donkeys soon became familiar sights to the Anzacs, many of whom knew Simpson by the nickname such as Scotty, which was in reference to his ancestry since he was Scottish, and Simmy. Simpson himself was also sometimes referred to as Murphy, the name of the main donkey that he would take to go rescue other people. Other Anzac stretcher bearers began to emulate Simpson's use of the donkeys. And this is how Australians and New Zealanders became ass men. It is very commonly known that all Australians and all New Zealanders are ass men. And it's because of John Simpson, making sure that people knew how great asses were. Colonel John Monash wrote, Private Simpson and his little beast earned the admiration of everyone at the upper end of the valley. They worked all day and night throughout the whole period since the landing, and the help rendered to the wounded was invaluable. Simpson knew no fear and moved unconcernedly amid shrapnel and rifle fire, steadily carrying out his self-imposed task day by day, and he frequently earned the applause of the personnel for his many fearless rescues of wounded men from areas subject to rifle and shrapnel fire. He worked that ass. He worked those asses until those asses were done. Other contemporary accounts of Simpson at Gallipoli speak of his bravery and invaluable service in bringing wounded down from the heights above Anzac Cove through shrapnel and Monash gullies. However, his donkey service spared him the even more dangerous and arduous work of hauling seriously wounded men back from the front lines on a stretcher. So, he kind of got out of slightly worse shit. It was all shit, but he got out of a little, slightly worse shit by having an ass with him, by having his donkey with him. So, enough about John Simpson for now. We'll come back to him a little later. Moving on to May, believing Anzac to be secure, Hamilton moved the Australian 2nd Infantry Brigade and the New Zealand Infantry Brigade, along with 20 Australian field guns, to the Hells Front as reserves for the Second Battle at Krithia. Involving a force of 20,000 men, it was the first general attack at Hells and was planned for daylight. French troops were to capture Creves, Dere, and the British. And the British, Australians, and New Zealanders were assigned to Krithia and Aki Baba. After 30 minutes of artillery preparation, the assault began at mid-morning on the 6th of May. The British and French advanced along the Gully, Fir Tree, Krithia, and Creves spurs, which were separated by deep gullies. Fortified by the Ottomans as the attackers advanced, they became separated when trying to outflank Ottoman strong points and found themselves in unfamiliar terrain. Under artillery and then machine gun fire from the Ottoman outposts that had not been spotted by British aerial reconnaissance, the attack was stopped. The next day, reinforcements resumed the advance. The attack continued on the 7th of May, and 4 battalions of New Zealanders attacked up Krithia Spur on the 8th of May. With the 29th Division, the attackers managed to reach a position just south of the village. Late in the afternoon, the Australian 2nd Brigade advanced quickly over open ground to the British front line. Amidst small arms and artillery fire, just fucking running through as their shit's blowing up, getting fucked over, the brigade charged towards Krithia and gained 600 meters, or 660 yards, which was about 400 meters or 440 yards short of the main objective, with 1,000 casualties. Just, for the shit that's been going on, it's kind of standard. Just 1,000 people dead. At this point, probably no big deal for them. Near Fir Tree Spur, the New Zealanders managed to get forward and link up with the Australians. Although the British were held up and the French were exhausted, despite having occupied a point overlooking their objective, the attack was suspended and the Entente dug in, having failed to take Krithia or Akibaba, which kind of fucking sucks. I mean, they were so fucking close too, right here. A brief period of consolidation followed. The Entente had almost run out of ammunition. They were bone dry, particularly for the artillery, and both sides consolidated their defenses. The Ottomans relieved troops opposite the Australian line, which was reinforced by the Australian light horse operating as infantry. Sporadic fighting continued with sniping, grenade attacks, and raids. Just kind of Rambo operations for a little bit here while they're, kind of trying to figure out what the fuck to do. The opposing trenches separated in places by only a few meters. The Australians lost a number of officers to sniping, including the commander of the 1st Division, Major General William Bridges, who was wounded while inspecting a 1st Light Horse Regiment position near Steele's post, and died of his injuries on the hospital ship HMHS Gascon on the 18th of May. It was a real loss too. A lot of people like this guy. He invented the card game Bridge. And that's why, a lot of your grandparents play that game today. JK, I wish. I try to find more interesting stuff to kind of talk about, but basically this was kind of how it was going. Just people were trying to do reconnaissance and getting sniped out of thin air during the month of May. Okay, let's go ahead and move on to the 19th of May now, where the Ottoman begins their counteroffensive. So on the 19th of May, 42,000 Ottoman troops launched an attack at Anzac to push the 17,000 Australians and New Zealanders back into the sea. They're like, get back to where you came from, the Australians and New Zealanders. We all know you're mer people. And they wanted the mermaids to go back to the sea where they belonged. Or, they're just trying to get him out of their area. And not that crazy shit that I just came up with. Short of artillery and ammunition, the Ottomans intended to rely on surprise and weight of numbers, but on the 18th of May, the crews of a flight of British aircraft spotted the Ottoman preparations. So right before they launched their attack, they were spotted. And the Ottomans would suffer 13,000 casualties in the attack, which is fucking crazy. Of which 3,000 men were killed, which means the other people, obviously, weren't men. They were animals. No, I'm kidding. No, but there are 13,000 casualties. Australian and New Zealand casualties were 160 killed and 468 wounded, which pretty goddamn good, all things considering. That's like per person killed, that person had a KD ratio of like 100 or something. I don't know, something crazy like that, or like 10 at least. Like 100 because of 13,000 people died, which is crazy. But in the 160 killed, sadly, the dead included a stretcher bearer known as John Simpson Kirkpatrick. Our ass man died in this counterattack. And Private Victor Laidlaw, with the 2nd Field Ambulance, wrote in his diary of Simpson's death: "Another fatality I found out today was a private in the 1st Field Ambulance. He had been working between the base and firing line, bringing down wounded on an ass. He had done invaluable service to our cause, taught me my love for asses. And one day he was bringing down a man from the trenches and coming down an incline, and he was shot right through the heart, which is just so sad. It was regretted on all sides, as this chap was noticed by all. And everybody got to know him. One couldn't miss him, as he used to always work with his ass, cheerful and willing. This man goes to his death as an ass man, and I go on with my life as an ass man." Okay, maybe the part's about being an ass man. He didn't say that, but the rest of that was pretty much true. He just regarded him as always cheerful and happy. John Kirkpatrick was survived by his mother and sister, who were still living in South Shields. He was buried at the beach cemetery. Ottoman losses were so severe that a truce was organized by Aubrey Herbert and others on the 24th of May to bury the dead lying in no man's land, which led to a camaraderie between armies, much like the Christmas truce of 1914 on the Western Front. It's from Private Victor Laidlaw of the Australian 2nd Field Ambulance described the day. The armistice was declared from 8:30 a.m. this morning till 4:30 p.m. It is wonderful. Things are naturally quiet, and I felt like getting up and making a row of myself, just really fucking around a bit. The rifle fire is quiet. No shell fire. The stench round the trenches where the dead had been lying for weeks was awful. Some of the bodies were mere skeletons at that point. I picked up my buddy Jimmy and his skull, and I just kind of made him talk to me. Because I miss him. I miss Jimmy so goddamn much. He seems so very different to see each side near each other's trenches, burying the dead. Each man taking part in the ceremony is called a pioneer and wears 2 white bands on his arms. Everybody's taking advantage of the armistice to do anything they want to do out of cover, and a large number are down bathing. And you think today was Cup Day down at one of our seaside beaches. Everybody was getting nude, and everybody was fucking. Maybe the part about fucking and maybe picking up his buddy's skull, again, I just added for embellish. Also, I just like to think that anybody from back then was... anybody that talked back then just sounded like that old timey 50s radio host, like news reported today on the down low. Sorry about that, but that's just how it's going to be anytime I read from back then, unless they're German. And then I'm going to do a terrible German accent. And the only reason I feel like I can do that is because I'm part German. I know I'm not from Germany, but I have enough German blood in me that it's like, I feel like I get a pass. Anyways, this truce was not repeated formally at all. They might have done it once or twice more, but never formally again. So now we move on to June, the operations that took place in June through July of 1915. So troops of the 29th Indian Brigade were in the trenches of Gallipoli during this time, and in the Hell sector, which had been extensively entrenched by both sides, the Entente attacked Krithia and Aki Baba again in the Third Battle of Krithia on the 4th of June, with the 29th Division, Royal Naval Division, 42nd Division, and 2 French divisions. And the reason why the French ones aren't named, obviously because the Brits still fucking hate them during this time, just for kicking their ass in a few of the other wars that they were in against each other. No, I have no idea why they don't name the French divisions. It just wasn't named there. The attack was repulsed, and with it, the possibility of a decisive breakthrough ended. There was no breaking through, and trench warfare resumed, which trench warfare is fucking terrifying. So with the objectives being measured in hundreds of yards, casualties were approximated 25% on both sides. So both sides lost 25% of their people. The British lost 4,500 from 20,000 men, and the French 2,000 casualties from 10,000 troops, and Ottoman losses were 9,000 casualties according to the Turkish official history, and 10,000 according to another account. Because, the Turkish have to, make their numbers seem a little, they lost like, 1,000 less people than most people thought that they lost, obviously. In June, the seaplane carrier HMS Ben My Cree, I'm not making that up. That's what it's called, Ben My Cree, or Tree, or Chree, arrived, and the Entente Air Fort increased from a squadron to number 3 wing, Royal Navy Air Force, RNAS. Whatever. The 52nd Lowland Division also landed at Hells in preparation for the Battle of Gully Ravine, which began on the 28th of June and achieved a local success, which advanced the British line along the left Aegean flank of the battlefield. Sanders credited the defense to 2 Ottoman officers, Vaik Passa and Albe Refet. So between July 1st and the 5th of July, the Ottomans counterattacked the new British line several times but failed to regain the lost ground. Ottoman casualties for the period were estimated at around 14,000 men at this time. On the 12th of July, 2 fresh brigades from the 52nd Division attacked at the center of the line along the Akibaba Nula, or Bloody Valley, and gained very little ground and lost 2,500 casualties out of 7,500 men. The Royal Naval Division had 600 casualties, and French losses were, around 800 men. Ottoman losses were about 9,000 casualties and 600 prisoners. Again, Ottomans are actually getting their shit rocked here for once. The third tour began on July 21st when E-14 passed through straits despite a new anti-submarine net placed near the Narrows, because, the nets were working against the British subs. So subs were trying to come in and get more shit to reinforce people. The next attempt would be made by Mariette on the 27th of July, which was caught in the net and forced to the surface and bombarded by shore batteries. Mariette was scuttled, or just people just lost. They just, got rid of it, essentially. On the 8th of August, E-11 torpedoed the battleship Barbaros Hereden with the loss of 253 men and sank a gunboat, 7 transports, and 23 sailing vessels. So go E-11. Okay, now we move on to August. So the failure of the Entente to capture Krithia in July, or make really any progress at all on the Hells front, led Hamilton to form a new plan to secure the Sari Bair range of hills at the Battle of Sari Bair and capture high ground on Hill 971. In the Battle of Chinook Bair, both sides had been reinforced, the original 5 Entente divisions having been increased to 15, and the first 6 Ottoman divisions to 16. They're about even here, about even with the total amount of men, with Ottomans just having slightly more. The Entente planned to land 2 fresh infantry divisions from the 9th Corps at Solva, which was about 5 miles north of the Anzac, where, they've already taken, and a lot of people lost their lives to take that area. But, fuck it, go take another area, because why not? Followed by an advance on Sari Bair from the northwest. At Anzac, an offensive would be made against the Sari Bair range by advancing through rough and thinly defended terrain. Very thinly. Again, Sanders had goatsied himself pretty hard, so they saw that pink fleshy weak spot north of the Anzac perimeter. This would be achieved by an attack on Baby 700 from the neck by dismounted Australian light horsemen from the 3rd Light Horse Brigade, in concert with an attack on Chinook Bair summit by New Zealanders from the New Zealand Infantry Brigade, who would traverse Rhododendron Ridge, the apex and the farm. As well. Hill 971 would be attacked by Gurkhas of the 29th Indian Brigade and the Australians of the 4th Infantry Brigade, which I'm sure, that's where, Indians started feeling like they can call people cunts because they hung out with a bunch of Australians here in World War I. The Entente had 40 aircraft, mainly from 3-wing RNASs at Imbros, which had replaced its Voisins with Farmans and Nieuport 10s. The Ottomans had 20 aircraft, of which 8 were stationed at Calais. Entente aircraft made reconnaissance flights, spotted for naval guns, and conducted low-level bombing of Ottoman reserves again as they were brought up to the battlefield. You think of bringing that up? Boom! Get exploded, bitch. That's what they're doing. Entente aircraft also undertook anti-shipping operations in the Gulf of Saros, where a seaplane from HMS Ben Mikri sank an Ottoman tug with an air-launched torpedo, which is pretty fucking cool. That must have been like a hard hit back then. The landing in Suvla Bay took place on the night of the 6th of August. Against light opposition, the British commander, Lieutenant General Frederick Stopford, had limited his early objectives and then failed to forcefully push his demands for an advance inland, and little more than the beach was seized. The Ottomans were able to occupy Anafarta Hills, preventing the British from penetrating inland. They tightened up. They clenched their asshole. They wouldn't let the British penetrate right there. They were too tight, which contained the landings and reduced the Suvla front to static trench warfare again, bucking constant trenches. World War I was fought in trenches for the most part. The offensive was preceded on the evening of the 6th of August by diversions at Hels, where the Battle of Krithia Vineyard became another costly stalemate. Again, both sides are just losing men. They're just getting sucked into death's void right here. At Anzac, the divisionary Battle of Lone Pine, led by the Australian 1st Infantry Brigade, captured the main Ottoman trench line and diverted Ottoman forces, but the attacks at Chunuk Bair and Hill 971 failed. So all their work they did basically meant shit because the other two couldn't nut up and, finish what they started. The New Zealand Infantry Brigade came within 500 meters or 550 yards or near the peak of Chunuk Bair by dawn on the 7th of August, but was not able to seize the summit until the following morning. So on the morning of the 7th of August, the Australian 3rd Light Horse Brigade attacked on a narrow front at the neck to coincide with the New Zealand attack from Chunuk Bair against the rear of the Ottoman defenses. The opening artillery barrage lifted about 7 minutes too soon. So they came a little too early. They got a little excited, and as soon as they entered, it just exploded a little too soon, which alerted the Ottomans, and the attack was a costly failure. So when you prematurely come and you prematurely explode off, you're gonna fail, and that needs to be known. Okay, don't make sure you nut up a little before, get a little practice on before you go in for the real thing, or you're gonna make everyone sad, including yourself. An attack on Hill 971 never took place because of this, and after the Australian 4th Infantry Brigade, an Indian brigade lost direction during the night as well. So attempts to try and resume the attack were easily repulsed by the Ottoman defenders at a great cost to the Entente. So now they're just losing and getting their shit rocked. Again, a lot of mistakes were made on the Allied side here. The New Zealanders held out on Chunuk Bair for 2 days before being relieved by 2 new army battalions from the Wiltshire and Loyal North Lancashire regiments. But an Ottoman counterattack on the 10th of August, led by Mustafa Kemal, swept them from the heights. Again, Mustafa knows what the fuck he's doing. Mustafa, despite really only knowing the English for, gangbangs, he also knew the New Zealanders' weakness. Knew that they had too much of a love for, making really shitty Thor movies. And I'm kidding. So, of 760 men in the New Zealand Wellington Battalion who reached the summit, 711 became casualties. Almost all of them died. So sad. With the Ottoman recapture of the ground, the Entente's best chance of victory was completely lost. They were fucked at this point. The Suvla landing was reinforced by the arrival of the 10th Irish Division on the 7th of August. So, again, we're going back to Suvla again. So back on the 8th of August, they began landing, and on the 10th, the dismounted Yeomanry of the 2nd Mounted Division was able to arrive on the 18th of August after they started leaving. Anyways, back to the 12th of August. The 54th Division attacked the Kavak Tepe and Take Tepe, crossing the Anfarta Plain. The attack failed, and Hamilton briefly considered the evacuation of Suvla and Anzac during this time. Because he was like, well, we're getting our shit kicked in. We've been getting our shit kicked in. Maybe it's time to call a retreat. I bet most of his troops were like, fuck yeah, please do it. However, Elements of the new Australian 2nd Division began arriving at Anzac from Egypt, with the 5th Infantry Brigade landing from the 19th to the 20th of August, and 6th Brigade and the 7th Brigade arriving in early September. So they were like, okay, we got a few more people, might as well just stick it out for a second. The 29th Division was also shifted from Hells to Suvla. The final British attempt to resuscitate the offensive came on the 21st of August in the Battle of Scimitar Hill and the Battle of Hill 60. Control of the hills would have united the Anzac and Suvla fronts, making them much, much stronger, much more organized than before, as they're kind of split into a bunch of different divisions now. But those attacks failed. So on the 17th of August, Hamilton had requested another 95,000 troops, but a day earlier, the French had announced plans to Kitchener for an autumn offensive in France. A meeting of the Dardanelles Committee on the 20th of August determined that the French offensive would be supported by a maximum effort, which left only about 25,000 reinforcements for the Dardanelles. So on the 23rd of August, after news of the failure at Scimitar Hill, Hamilton went on to the defensive as Bulgarian entry into the war, which would allow Germans to rearm the Turkish army, was imminent and left little opportunity for the resumption of offensive operations. Basically, he was like, if I don't get shit started soon, and I don't start kicking their ass, we are all fucking dead. So back to September now. On the 20th of September, 1915, the Newfoundland Regiment was deployed at Suvla Bay with the 29th Division. On September 25th, Kitchener proposed detaching 2 British and 1 French division for service in Salonika in Greece, which was the beginning of the end of the Entente campaign in Gallipoli. Instead, a counter-proposal from Sir Ian Hamilton was agreed to. Only the 10th Division, or the 10th Irish Division, and the 156th Infantry Division of France were withdrawn from the peninsula. So the Irish and the French got fucking lucky here. By the end of September, these troops were concentrating at Mudros for conveyance to the new front. Alan Moorhead wrote that during the stalemate, an old Ottoman Batman, fucking Batman was here, was regularly permitted to hang his platoons washing on the barbed wire, undisturbed, and that there was a constant traffic of gifts being thrown across no man's land, dates and sweets from the Ottoman side, and cans of beef and packs of cigarettes from the Entente side. We kept throwing it to each other because, it's not like we really hated each other. We just, had to fight this war because rich people told us to. Really kind of how it went down. Conditions at Gallipoli grew worse for everyone as summer heat and poor sanitation resulted in an explosion in the fly population. Lots of flies, which is really fucking annoying. So people just started getting really annoyed and agitated because of the fucking buzzing. Eating became extremely difficult as unburied corpses. Oh man, I'm gonna gag. Ugh. Became bloated and putrid. The precarious Entente lodgements were poorly situated, which caused supply and shelter problems. A dysentery epidemic spread through the Entente trenches at Anzac and Hels, while the Ottomans also suffered heavily from disease, which resulted in many deaths. They were shitting themselves to deaths in these trenches. Holy fuck. All because some Serbian nationalist had to kill someone. They just had to kill the heir. Fucking assholes. So this is when evacuation begins. Hamilton was like, I do not want to die shitting myself. And after the failure of the August offensive, the Gallipoli campaign drifted. Ottoman success began to affect public opinion in Britain, with criticism of Hamilton's performance being smuggled out by Keith Murdoch, Elise Ashmead Bartlett, and other reporters. They were just shitting on him, not realizing Hamilton was really trying to get good shit for his guys, and if he would have been better prepared and better outfitted, he probably could have eventually taken the area, but the upper wigs essentially decided resources were better spent in other operations of the war. And these reporters didn't care. They just wanted to shit on someone, like reporters today. They just like doing a smear campaign because it's fun. Stopford and other dissident officers also contributed to the air of gloom, and the possibility of evacuation was raised on the 11th of October, 1915. Hamilton initially resisted the suggestion, fearing the damage to British prestige, but was sacked shortly afterwards and replaced by Lieutenant General Sir Charles Monroe, because Hamilton, again, really, he didn't want to look bad and like have the British look bad in this area. So the people were like, nope, fuck you, get fired. And he lost his job. Autumn and winter brought relief from the heat, but also led to gales, blizzards, and flooding, resulting in men drowning and freezing to death while they're dealing with this. Oh, so sad. And other thousands of men suffered frostbite as well. Fucking terrible. The Serbian defeat in the Serbian campaign in autumn of 1915 prompted France and Britain to transfer troops from the Gallipoli campaign to Greek Macedonia. The Macedonian front was established to support the remnants of the Serbian army to conquer Vardar, Macedonia. They wanted to get Alexander the Great's homeland back. They were getting Macedonia. So on the 4th of September, got a little ahead of myself. Despite such reserves, by mid-September, the Entente come back. Okay, the situation at Gallipoli was complicated by Bulgaria joining the Central Powers, because Bulgaria decided to join up with Germany in early October of 1915. The British and French opened a second Mediterranean front at Salonika by moving the two divisions from Gallipoli and reducing the flow of reinforcements. So Gallipoli was just they gave up at this point. A land route between Germany and the Ottoman Empire through Bulgaria was opened, and the Germans rearmed the Ottomans with heavy artillery capable of devastating Entente trenches. So trench warfare became obsolete here, and they were going to just get blown the fuck up, especially on the confined front at Anzac, modern aircraft, and experienced crews as well. So in late November, an Ottoman crew in a German Albatross CI shot down a French aircraft over Gaba Tepe, and the Austro-Hungarian 36 Habits Battery and 9th Motomors Battery artillery units arrived, providing a substantial reinforcement of Ottoman artillery. They were loaded, ready to fucking go. And the British and French were not, nor were the Australian or New Zealanders. They were fucked. Monroe recommended evacuation to Kitchener, who in early November visited the Eastern Mediterranean. After consulting with the commanders of the 8th Corps at Hels and the 9th Corps at Suvla and Anzac, Kitchener agreed with Monroe and passed his recommendation to the British cabinet, who confirmed the decision to evacuate in early December. It took them like 3 months of just getting their shit rocked before they decided it was time to retreat. How are they? I don't understand why it took that many people. If someone is leading an army and they are there, it should be up to their discretion when to retreat and to pull people out. But obviously, I guess if the upper brass is sending reinforcements to them or their spies, they'd have to reroute that. But still, ridiculous that they had to wait that long. Due to the narrowness of no man's land in the winter weather, many casualties were anticipated during the embarkation. The untenable nature of the Entente position was made apparent by a rainstorm on the 26th of November. The downpour at Suvla lasted for 3 days, and there was a blizzard in early December. Just really fucking them, making sure that they can't leave. Rain flooded trenches, drowned soldiers, and washed unburied corpses into the lines, which psychologically must have fucked with them hard. The following snow killed way more still from exposure. It really fucking sucks. Just they could not catch a break for like 3 straight months. It's insane. Suvla and Anzac were to be evacuated in late December, the last troops leaving before dawn on the 20th of December. You know, they might be able to spend Christmas not dying and freezing to death. Troop numbers had been slowly reduced since the 7th of December, and ruses such as William Scurry self-firing rifle, which had been rigged to fire by water, dripped into a pan attached to the trigger that were used to disguise the Entente departure. At Anzac Cove, troops maintained silence for an hour or more until curious Ottoman troops ventured to inspect the trenches, whereupon the Anzacs opened fire. This is what the offensive was. This incident successfully discouraged the Ottomans from inspecting when the actual evacuation occurred. A mine was detonated at the neck, which killed 70 Ottoman soldiers, so they left mines as well. Just kind of being like, okay, we're leaving. Just, get them to not like try and come look for us as we're showing them our asses trying to leave here. And it worked. The Entente force was embarked, with the Australians suffering no casualties on the final night, but large quantities of supplies and stores fell into Ottoman hands, which fucking sucks. Hels was retained for a period, but a decision to evacuate the garrison was made on the 28th of December. So everybody at Hels had to go through hell during Christmas. Unlike the evacuation from Anzac Cove, Ottoman forces were looking for signs of withdrawal. Having used the interval to bring up reinforcements and supplies, General Sanders mounted an attack on the British at Gourlay Spur on the 7th of January 1916 with infantry and artillery, but the attack was a costly failure because Sanders fucking sucks, man. He sucked so hard. Mines were laid with time fuses, and that night, and on the night of the 7th or 8th of January, under the cover of a naval bombardment, the British troops began to fall back, about 5 miles from their lines to the beaches, where makeshift piers were used to board boats. The last British troops departed from Lancashire Landing around 4 a.m. on the 8th of January of 1916. So it took them a few days, but they were all able to get out. The Newfoundland Regiment was part of the rear guard and withdrew on the 9th of January. Among the first to land, remnants of the Plymouth Battalion Royal Marine Light Infantry were the last to leave the peninsula. Again, because if you're a Marine, you're the first one to get there to die, and you're the last one to leave. You fucking die if you're a Marine, essentially. Despite predictions of up to about 30,000 casualties, 35,268 troops, 3,689 heroes and horses and mules, 127 guns, 328 vehicles, and 1,600 long tons of equipment were removed. So, that's pretty all right. The 508 mules or donkeys that could not be embarked were killed so as not to fall into Ottoman hands. Oh, that's so sad. I bet John was crying from heaven. About 1,500 vehicles were left behind with smashed wheels, just making them not completely useless. I mean, if they had rubber or wheels, they could still use it for the most part. As at Anzac, large amounts of supplies, including gun carriages, ammunition, were all left behind. Hundreds of horses were slaughtered to deny them to the Ottoman. Oh, it's so fucking sad. So many animals just dying needlessly. A sailor was killed by debris from a magazine that exploded prematurely, and a lighter and a picket boat were lost as well, due to all of them just kind of like scorch earthing all of their shit to make sure the Ottomans couldn't get anything. Shortly after dawn, the Ottomans retook Hels. In the final days of the campaign, Ottoman air defenses had been increased by a German Ottoman fighter squadron, which began operations over the peninsula and inflicted the first British flying losses a couple of days after the evacuation of Hels, when 3 Fokker and Deckers shot down 2 RNAS aircraft. And that ends the Gallipoli, and kind of I briefly mentioned the Mesopotamian campaign, but that ends that for today. And actually, this is where I'm going to stop today's episode. We will continue with part 2 in the next episode. So let's get out of part 1 of today's quarrel. All right, guys, so that brings us to the end of part 1 of this episode. In part 2, we'll be going over the Sinai and Palestine campaign and going over Lawrence of Arabia and a few of the interesting story about the opium lace cigs, which will be a lot of fun. It will also include some true crime, so stick around for that. Again, as I was recording this, I realized we were about like an hour and a half in. I'm like, my episodes are usually just like an hour to an hour and a half max anyways. And I don't have as much time today to record this episode. So, just think of it as like, hey, you get 2 little parts. And normally, you'd only get like an hour or 2 for a quarrel. You're getting like a whole little campaign between the British and the Ottomans, which is really fucking cool. But yeah, next week's episode, there's going to be essentially no intro. We're going to just start right into the episode, going over the campaigns, picking up where this episode left off. If you're here for the code is tie ties whittle piggy toes, or you can do the code oink oink and check out on Feet Finder if you want to go to that. So again, that is oink oink. Please do not share those photos. Okay. I'm very curious how many of you actually went to Feet Finder and found the fake account that I made that is called Tie Tie's Whittle Picky Toes. If you did, and realized that I don't have any photos uploaded, but I made it just for this prank, and you're a little mad at that. Well, sorry, that just fucking sucks. I thought it was hilarious, so enjoy being laughed at by me. I don't know. I might pull up more pranks than you guys in future episodes. This is how I have fun. But yeah, so I mean, today's episode was pretty interesting. I thought the British were super incompetent during this part of their campaign against the Ottomans. They definitely got their shit rocked in, and fucking sad that John Kirkpatrick and his asses never made it out alive from there. But the guy was a hero, saved a bunch of people. What did you think? What was your favorite part of this? Anything interesting that you learned? I mean, I learned obviously a ton as I was researching, but those submarine nets being used is kind of fucking crazy. That they essentially use fishing nets to capture metal fish that submarines were. Again, if you like this episode, please share it with your friends, family, loved ones. If you didn't, I don't know. Just tell me what I did wrong. Let me know. You can message me at Historical Quarrels. You can leave a review. Hell, if I get a negative review, I'll, take it as advice. Maybe I'd need to do something better, and I'll do my best for that. If there's anything that you did like, leave a review as well for that. Let me know what I did do good, and I'll try and keep repeating that. Yeah, that's it for today. So, next week, just be ready for the rest of this. And then the following week, we'll go over a different story. We'll be out of World War I for now. Who knows? I might come back to it, and you'll have to deal with World War I and trench warfare again, and people, bloating up. Oh God, that part about the corpses fucked me up, man. It fucked me up hard. It was so gross. I have a very strong gag reflex, and oh man, that was so bad. But again, you can reach out to us through historicalquarrels@gmail.com or through our Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. I guess the Twitter's mine, so you just look up Tyler Eckhart on Twitter, or Ginger Ninja, I think is what I did set as a kid. I'll probably have to make like an official one if I get enough people that are trying to request to follow me or something, whatever. But yeah, you can do that. Reach out to me, talk to me. I want to get to know you better. I want to get to know my listeners better. I think it'd be super cool. And then, yeah, get ready for Stereotypical. The episode that we're doing with my friends is coming out on Thursday. And that's going to be cool. It's going to be, fun. It's just us talking, going over some topics we found interesting. For me, I found this Reddit page that I thought was super funny, and I wanted to share with them. So, but that is all. You guys have a good one. Stay safe out there. Stay happy. Share this knowledge with other people. Learn more about history. It's a great subject. Bye-bye.